everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, overwhelmed Christians who want to stop being busy and overwhelmed and move into freedom and abundance and peace. I'm Liz Frerichs, and this is my crazy husband, Evan.
Hello.
He's not really crazy.
I just made
He's
her
just
do the
being
intro
ridiculous.
4 times in a row because she kept laughing.
Because you kept being ridiculous. Ironically enough, we are talking about being engaged with the world around us.
Yeah.
Which means that I shouldn't be ignoring you when you're being ridiculous.
Yeah, and you weren't. You were laughing at me.
That's true. As you guys know, we work our way through the CSCs. The CSCs are being calm, surrendered, centered, connected, and complete. And this week, we've been spending the whole week talking about being complete. On Monday, we talked about compartmentalization, being somebody different at work or at home, at church, different places.
Yeah.
And on Tuesday, we talked about addictions. And yesterday, we talked about time compartmentalization. In other words, being in the past or the present and the future, being in more than one place
Putting
at
your
a time.
brain, in all those places.
Exactly.
Yeah. Not time traveling.
Not time traveling. Yeah. Today we are going to talk about not being engaged with the world around you. Like I said, kind of that disinterest or denial, depending on whether it's on purpose or not.
Yeah. Or boredom. Not really wanting to be there, and so choosing to not be there in your mind.
That's true, sending your mind somewhere else. Although that kind of goes along with being present. It's that not being engaged with what's actually happening around you. And that can either
There's a number of reasons, yeah.
Right. It can either be, wishing that your problems would go away, so you're just ignoring them. Sometimes I have seen this happen before where you ignore a problem I should not say you in the general. I have seen someone ignore problems to the point where they ceased to be aware that they existed. The problems, not the person.
Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, because I think that's the point of disengaging, is to get away from the problem. And if you can convince yourself that there's no more problem,
yeah, it's
problem
amazing
solved.
how that works. You just ignore it for long enough that suddenly you're like, oh, that totally wasn't even there in the first place. But I think deep down, I don't know because I've never done that for long enough that the problem ceased to exist for me. But I feel like, at least in my brain, deep down there would be this part of me screaming, there's an elephant in the room! There's an elephant in the room! Or whatever the problem is,
But I think, I don't know if I've ever done that exactly either, but I think I've definitely could identify. I think the longer you ignore it, the bigger the elephant gets. And then it's like, there's no way I'm going to be able to tame the elephant now. Might as well keep ignoring it. You kind of get in a feedback loop. Yeah,
totally. I have a note that, problems that are left untended get bigger. They're like weeds that just spread. Mm-hmm. We're like spilling acid on the ground, and then if you don't clean it up right away, it just eats a hole in your floor, and it's bad. You don't want to just leave it untended.
Yeah. So why do we lose interest in the situation, or do that kind of break away, that extreme amputation of an entire thought, right? That problem exists in a thought in my mind, and I'm just going to throw the whole thing out. Ignore it.
Well, I think there are a couple reasons. Like, either a lot of it comes back to not having the resources to handle it. The problem feels so overwhelming that you just don't even know what to do about it.
Yeah. Well, and I think if we're honest, all of our problems we're ill-equipped to deal with. That's why we need God and we need each other. But we do tend to divide up in the categories like, there are some I can do, right?
Yes.
I can vacuum the floor for 12 hours a day.
12 hours a day?
Well, if that's the only thing you thought you could actually accomplish and you needed to accomplish something, that's how crazy it is sometimes, though. Like we talked about before, the tyranny of the urgent versus what's really important.
Yeah.
And this is maybe a kind of that where I'm going to disengage from what's really important because that stuff's really hard and I'm not really sure what to do about it.
That's
so
true.
I'm gonna, clean my house or fold laundry or something.
Yeah.
These are things I know how to do. so I'm going to do them. Like I was talking about yesterday, I know how to eat a pizza when I'm stressed. I don't know how to solve the problem, but I do know how to eat a pizza.
Yeah.
And so I'll do that. Mm-hmm. This is maybe a cousin of that.
Yeah, that's true. They are very related. It's interesting. I mean, I think it depends on where you're at. Because for some people, if you have trauma in your background, your brain can literally not have the neural pathways to handle something.
Sure.
So
you could, yeah.
In that case, you can end up with things, this has happened to me before as we're talking about it, coming back to mind. Yeah. But where, you'll literally forget things because it's too hard for your brain just can't process it. And but you have to then decide that you're going to develop the neural pathways. You can't just leave it there.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's what adults do, and adults that are growing, like we're going to be working on that.
Yeah.
Kids, I think, can ignore things, and other people in their life, or their kids or their parents or somebody's going to like make them face the music at some point. But if left to their own, they could actually. But yeah, adults would have to do that. Try to engage with the real world, because that's the real world. I mean, yes, like you said at the very beginning, I think some part of them has to realize that elephant's just not going away.
Right.
And there's no way to live with an elephant.
Especially not one that keeps expanding. You run out of room.
Yes. You have to keep buying a bigger and bigger house.
Yeah, it's really interesting, that idea that problems get worse and worse the longer you leave them. I think we've talked before on the show, or maybe not. Maybe I've forgotten. But I think we talked about our will before on the show.
We did. Well, actually, I don't know. We talked about it on a show.
I don't know if it was one of the ones we published or not.
Yeah, we recorded some test shows. That's why the show's so polished. Okay, go on.
Anyway, our will was like this huge thing. We started working on it, and then it was right before I got sick. And so it was on our to-do list for a few years. And we'd actually
started it, like, we used that webpage where you can get legal documents, whatever. Right. And we started to fill it out, and then we stopped.
Right.
And then for years, we never came back.
And it was constantly on my mental list. And I just remember thinking, like it kept getting more and more stressful. And I thought it was going to take so much time. And then when we finally sat down to do it, it took us like an hour, Yeah. I mean, it wasn't that long. I just remember having it be this huge weight off my shoulders.
Me too.
Because we had just put it off for so long. Whereas if we would have done it, which we couldn't have because of my illness, but if we could have just done it at the beginning and been like, woohoo, we're done, it would have been so much less stress. It's like every day of not doing it added to the stress to where I was convinced it was going to take us a solid week of work, no sleeping. Uh-huh. And then it just ended up taking like an hour.
Yeah, that does reinforce, because it was stressing me out too, but I was more able to do that amputation where it's like, well, I'm not even thinking about it. And you would just let it, like, compounding interest of stress.
Oh, totally.
And so you couldn't forget about it. So, yeah, there's different ways to disengage.
So obviously, you need to recognize when you're not engaged with the world around you, which if you don't know that you don't know is hard. So obviously, the first thing to do is pray for the Lord to show you if there's any place where you're disengaged that you're unaware of.
Yeah, and try to do a little a self-evaluation. I mean, I think a lot of these things we're talking about are kind of the big important things in life.
Yeah.
I mean, and then it's easy to drop down and do the low-hanging fruit, easy stuff. So if you find maybe you're dissatisfied because it's like, well, nothing I do really matters. It's just busy work and it's so unsatisfying. Maybe it's because you're avoiding some big satisfying thing.
Right.
But it seems too hard to tackle.
Well, and it's so amazing how some of those things, like the will, wasn't that big of a deal once we actually sat down and did it. It just felt like it was going to be a huge deal. And one of the ways that, for me anyway, I kind of keep track of, what are the things that are still stressing me out, is I tend to redo Bible studies that I've done before. And so when I look at something, look at my answers when I did the Bible study the first time around, And actually last year I was doing one that I had done right after our first daughter was born.
Yeah.
And one of my answers for one of the major stressors in my life was finances. And as I was filling it out, I was like, oh my gosh, it's the same answer. Uh-huh. And so that was actually what prompted we took a bunch of classes in finances, and because we didn't have the resources to do it well.
Yeah.
It was just overwhelming because we didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah. We got way more intentional.
Right. But instead of saying, oh, this is such a problem, I mean, because it had been 8 years or something since I had done that particular study. And instead of going, yep, this is still a big problem, oh well.
I'll come back 8 years later.
Right. I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot still have this be a huge problem. Like, this is not cool that I still have this as a major stressor in my life. I need to work on this,
sure. And that doesn't mean it's not easy though. I mean, our budget meeting today was fairly stressful.
It's true.
But it's
so much better than it used to be. I mean, we did a tapping book, like tapping around money issues, and it was so transformative, at least for me. Probably you didn't do any of the tapping, but I did, and it was really, I mean, I felt beforehand that it was impossible to ever have a budget and stick to it, and then afterwards I was like, oh, this is totally doable. You just have to do X, Y, Z. So tapping is one way that you can definitely work through some of those issues to make them to kind of take away that emotional compound interest. So you can just look at it clearly. The other practical thing that I thought of that has helped me is to write an overwhelm list.
Okay.
Like, write down the things that are super stressing you out and that you can't even stand to look at, like the room that you don't go into kind of thing in your brain. And write those things down, and then write down, cross off everything that you have no control over.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Because some of the things that are huge stressors, have been huge stressors in my life, have nothing to do with me and have everything to do with other people. And I have zero control over what they do. Mm-hmm. So once I realized that worrying about it accomplished absolutely nothing, and that I was like, oh, I got to figure out how to fix this. But once I realized I couldn't, like, it's up to the other people involved to fix it, I was able to let go of that, which was so freeing.
Yeah, because you really, what was your choice at that point? Hang on to it and still drive yourself crazy, or it's still hard to let go, right?
Yes, yeah, it's definitely still hard to let go.
It's well, it'd be crazy to hang on.
Exactly, and it frees up mental energy to then put towards, yesterday, like we were talking about with the pot, either you have all the water going into the pot in the sink, or you have some of the water trickling out, and then it takes longer for your pot to be filled. And I think a lot of our overwhelm comes from our brain's going a million different directions, our energy is going a million different directions, so we're not focused. And if we can let go of some of those things, let go of some of those worries, and actually put energy fully into solving the problem instead of thinking about solving the problem.
Yeah. And, right, letting go of the stuff that's really out of our control. And then just setting up a priority list and just doing one problem at a time. I mean,
exactly.
It's not going to do a complete life overhaul in a week or on a weekend or something. Come out on the other side, Mr. Shiny cool guy,
Yeah.
Examine yourself and pace yourself.
Definitely. Otherwise you'll burn out and then you just won't get anything done.
Yeah. I mean, even with like this year, we've taken a lot of classes, and in the middle of them, we've been in the middle of like 2 or 3 classes at a time. And we've been like, this is too much,
Yep.
I mean, you got to find your sweet spot, I guess. What you really have time for.
I hope you guys have an awesome Thursday, and that you can, do something. We listed off a few different things you can do. You don't have to do all of them. Just pick one thing, whether that's, praying that God will show you the lies that you're believing and what the truth is. 5-second prayer. It's not going to take that much time, but it can totally change everything.
Yeah, and that's always a big step back towards peace, is taking it to God in prayer, whatever it is.
Definitely.
And yeah, those are like heart kind of prayers that God loves to hear. I mean, he listens and he loves to hear the like, please heal my kitten because she's sick, or my boo-boo or whatever. But the like, God, my heart is overwhelmed right now with boredom, or I'm so disconnected from the world. I don't feel like I do anything significant. What am I supposed to do about that? That's an open heart and the kind of clay that God can work with.
Exactly. And he has a plan. I mean, if you are a believer, he has good works prepared in advance for you to do. He has a life filled with abundance and peace and freedom for you. Mm-hmm. So there's no reason to live in mediocrity or boredom.
Yeah. And it's not like you have to figure out what those are. God will reveal them to you in the right time to do them.
1% improvement.
Thanks for listening to the show. Please share the show with your friends and let us know on Facebook what you think. And we'd love to hear some of your stories about boredom or addiction or any of the CSCs, really.
And come back tomorrow. We're going to talk about some of those practical, nitty-gritty, how do you be complete things.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.